Okay. Okay, then we're starting about 1:30 and the roll call, Mr. Arisman.
Present.
And Mr. Ross
Present.
and Ms. Dean, staff
Present.
liaison.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Is there any member of the public in attendance?
There's nobody else here,
Okay.
just us.
All right. Okay. So then I guess we can move on to the approval of the minutes for the December 14th meeting. Does anyone have any corrections?
Move to accept.
Okay.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we are on to the meat of the matter, which is the discussion, the review of the discussion of the information that we've gathered since our December 14th meeting. And I'm thinking we could start with Dina, because she was going to look at the salary survey for the state, and with both salary information and benefit information. I don't know, Dina, were you able to get anything good from there?
I did get the AWC salary survey and I sent that out by email, so you would have a chance to review it. I can certainly bring it up on the screen if you'd like.
Yep, that would be good.
Let me
That's funny,
find it.
Did that go to the city website as opposed to our person?
No,
I
it went
just-
to us.
Yeah,
Huh, okay.
let's see. Once I got it, I filtered it so that you would only see the mayor and council, because it has like every position for every city, right?
Okay.
So I did filter it, and then but of course I sent it by Excel, so you could refilter it if you'd like. Let me find it. Do you see it?
Yes.
Yes, I
Yep.
do.
Great.
All right, good.
So ours is right here. And of course, we our council members get $750 a month, not 500. So that's a mistake, a reporting mistake there. And so I filtered it from most city highest population and then down. So you can kind of see where, right, where it's probably, that's a full-time mayor. But then when you get to Sammamish, it would not be a full-time mayor because the compensation is only $1,400 a month. So that kind of tells you, but again, is there a reporting error? You know what I mean? Data entry error? I don't know. That's why we would have to call cities to confirm their rates.
And some of them we've already done.
Great. Yeah.
I guess those we considered most comparable. And I'm sorry, what did it have the mayor's salary for Snoqualmie? Did it have 80?
For Snoqualmie, it did,
I'm looking at Edgewood, sorry.
it had 3,000.
3,000, okay. All right,
There we are. So here we
So
are
just-
here.
okay. Okay,
And I did confirm that the mayor is not on the city's health insurance. It's offered. So all of them can be offered the insurance, but they have to pay the premiums. And then the mayor is eligible for the enrolling in the DRS retirement or the pension, but it's based on DRS has a certain requirement. So it's based on minimum wage times 90 hours. That's the minimum that they have to make. So our mayor would qualify, but our council members do not qualify for that. Does that make sense?
yes.
I'm not sure how that works. So what is the dollar amount of that benefit?
Well, once they get, after 5 years, you're vested in the state retirement system. And then when you're of retirement age, then you would be able to pull a pension. Now, it all depends on how much you've put into it and what your average salaries are. So I don't know how much they would actually get. And it just adds years of service though. So if they do happen to have another job where they're contributing, it just adds to what they're already getting. So for some people, it's it's considerable, and for others, it's really nothing.
But does the city contribute alongside?
Yes,
They do. So we should know how much that is. Is the mayor participating in that? Did you say?
she
so?
declined.
Okay. But if she decided to join it, I assume there's a cap on how much you can contribute, but we match that?
So the DRS, the legislature actually determines the rates, the employee rate and the employer rate. And so depending on which plan you're in, those rates are set by the legislature. And I don't have the rates for the elects. I know that as a PERS member, I think it's like 8% a month that I contribute, and not really sure on what the city does.
Okay. Thank you.
And you said the council members would not trigger participation?
Right, they don't make enough.
Okay. Okay. And I guess this right here, we don't have any on the chart that we're looking at. There is no, or is column B the population?
Yeah, column B is.
Okay, okay, I see that. Thank you.
Mhm.
So we could pick out those that are comparable, like Anacord is actually population-wide, Sunnyside population-wide.
Right, so Anacortes actually does probably have a full-time mayor.
Mm-hmm,
And so does probably West Richland at $6,000 a month.
mm-hmm.
Port
Yeah,
Orchard.
what we went through last time was we went through that same list and then pared it down to the list that we went through in the last session where we felt they were more comparable, right? We didn't compare to anything east of the mountains, for example. We just
Mm-hmm.
didn't think it was apples and oranges from cost of living standpoint and other factors. But if there's any from those that we want, that you look at, that you want to add, we could put them on the spreadsheet that we're all working on, the Google sheet that we're working on, and then we can call those to verify.
Yeah, it looks like Lake Forest Park may be close.
Mhm.
Yeah, Lake Forest
That's up.
Park is on our list.
I've got it, I've already done
Oh, okay. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, okay.
it.
I see
I
that.
would challenge the idea that the best metric is population.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to hear your comments on that. I mean, it's not unimportant, but it's more important if the mayor is full-time, which even though ours is 0.25, which is an anomaly in any of the other 8 cities I talked to, they don't count FTEs for mayors or council members,
Yeah.
which I found interesting. But if you have your own police department, it adds complexity. And if you're sitting on a very large growth budget as a CEO, that adds complexity. And I think, frankly, those are more important than, the head count of how many citizens you have. But they certainly should be considered. And
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that.
yeah. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's the methodology we used to come up with the comparable cities list the last time, is looking at all of those factors. Now, it's not a perfect analogy, right? We're not going to get sort of perfect data,
Right.
but generally speaking, what is comparable? And I think, as we discussed, looking at some cities that are a little outside of the range, like Redmond, Woodinville, Issaquah, and we discounted Bellevue because it's too large. But looking at those other cities is also important because they share some of the same geographical growth patterns and some of the same, the other factors that you mentioned for Snoqualmie. They just happen to be a lot bigger. So it gives us an upper end of that, as well as, a comparable. So if you look at, for example, I'm not sure, I had a good conversation with the folks in Mount Lake Terrace this morning. I'm not sure if that's a comparable in terms of growth, but it could be comparable relative to size. I would put it below Snoqualmie as an example. So I think what we're trying to do is get a good measurement all around Snoqualmie, and then look at that data and say what makes the most sense. Now, what was interesting is some of the groups, and we'll have to look at some of the RCWs. I believe what we're doing is just making a decision on the next 2 years, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because I've talked to a couple of the cities that have actually put 5-year plans in place. So they actually went out and created this is what it's going to be like over the next 5 years. So since we're just doing one for 2 years, I think that what that does is it doesn't lock us into a 5-year window, and therefore some of the comparables might change over time.
Great. Did you find any that were doing, using the CPI as the metric for increases?
I did. Yeah.
I did not so far.
Yeah, I had a couple that, as I read the enabling legislation that they signed off on, there were COLAs in a couple of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one I did get a full from Mount Lake Terrace this morning. I got their full document. I haven't a chance to read it yet. It got emailed to me, but I don't know what they've based it on. What the other cities are giving me, I'm running into people that don't really know, to be honest with you. They're just, well, I can look up what it is, but I don't know really how we calculated it. So I think we're going to, we may have to go back and double check on a couple of these if we have questions.
Yeah. The city of Arlington had extremely high compensation. I thought the mayor, there is a city administrator, so the mayor is a mayor, and his compensation is $7,100 a month. And the council members each take home $1,840 a month. And they have scheduled in the code, in their municipal code, 100% of CPI for both 22 and 23. And they all participate in the city's health and retirement benefits. So that was my outlier, was the city of Arlington. I don't know anything about Arlington other than its population is, in the 20,000 range. It doesn't seem to be growing that fast. I don't even frankly know where it's located, but is there some explanation?
Yeah, it's north. I think it's north of Marysville, right?
Yeah, just north of Marysville.
Mm-hmm. Is there some explanation for why that would be such an outlier?
Generosity.
I mean, I know I used to work for the city of Arlington, and I'm very familiar with what goes on there. I really can't say.
Okay.
That does seem high. Those seem very high, though.
Mm-hmm.
It does. And I ran into, Snoqualmie, for example, which I believe is larger than Snoqualmie. I could be mistaken. I don't have the population.
It is.
And Snoqualmie, their mayor is 2,500. And she does get full benefits. And their city council is $513 a month. So, there's another outlier the other direction where they're larger than Snoqualmie, and they're actually paid lower than the Snoqualmie positions are. So I think it'll be really fun to get this all together and then look at it all on one sheet and use that because that's the whole point of this, right? Is there outliers all directions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, our mayor makes 3,000. Was that right?
Yes.
Currently. Yeah. So Sumner, which I think is a lot smaller, their mayor's at 2,500, for example. Their city council members are 1,100 a month. So it'll just be interesting when we get everything filled out on that sheet. And then what I would suggest you do is, as we all look at that other data from the salary survey, if there's a city that makes sense to add, just add it on to a line and let's drop their information in there. It certainly doesn't hurt to expand the pool a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, I just looked it up. I was thinking of Sammamish when you said it. You said Snoqualmie. It's only 10,154.
Okay, so it's a little smaller. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was thinking for some reason the county of Snoqualmie as opposed to the city, but I guess the city's small. Okay, so I think we're making good progress. I know, Graham, you've got most of yours done. I'm still waiting back. I had yesterday, believe it or not, is the day that it was sketched out to make a bunch of calls, and of course I ran into nobody being there. I'm still waiting on a few calls back, North Bend and Redmond. I think I have the rest of them that I'll plug in this evening or tomorrow. And then
I was wondering, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Jennifer.
I was wondering whether it would be useful to do at least one additional column, which would be the population.
Sure.
I actually have not done anything to the spreadsheet because frankly, I didn't want to mess it up. I never learned Excel. I just relied on my assistant for that. So I am very tentative about contributing to an Excel chart, but I can do that if you would like to have the data that way.
Jennifer,
Yeah,
I've already messed it up. Don't worry about it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
look,
Michael forgave me.
It's hard. It's actually hard to mess up if you just enter the data into the columns. Or the easiest way to do it is just take a column at the end and I'll just create notes on it, and you could just type everything in there, so it's sitting in there, by line, by city, and then we can go back and we can put it in. There's no formulas built in. Basically, it's just storage for words right now. So there's nothing really you can mess up about it.
Okay.
And the good thing about Google Sheets is even if you do mess it up, we could always go back to a previous version and recover it. So there's just think about it as all it is. It's a little box that you're typing stuff in. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. And then on the issue of population, it seems like growth is an important metric. So I just want that in the notes. If there is substantial population growth, a city like Snoqualmie and there are a few others that had more growth, and some were pretty stagnant. So we just want to put that in the notes section, I guess.
Yeah, and then I think maybe the next meeting or the one after. When do you leave again, Jennifer?
We are leaving on January 10th.
10th. Okay, so if we do one, basically the week before you leave, we should have all the data plugged in. I think we could use that session to go in and add a little color commentary to each one. Okay. And then I think we should have a pretty good idea, ballpark of where we want to be at that point. And I think there is, Graham and I talked about this earlier. I mean, we're looking at data, and we're going to get all the data we can in there. And then we're going to make a decision based on looking at those patterns of data and a little bit of subjectivity around, we think these cities are more alike than these cities, and therefore, we want to more closely reflect those, and therefore we chose this rate, and here's why.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a scenario where we're going to be wildly out of whack here, regardless, because we have a pretty good sense of, where the midpoints are and generally where the averages are coming in.
Does the Salary Commission, Dina, does the Salary Commission preserve any work product at all?
They haven't in the past.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that we can't do that moving forward.
Yeah, one of the ideas I had, Jennifer, was if we can take that Google sheet and then we can just download it into a PDF and send it to Dina to have as the work product, because it has the name and the number of who we contacted.
Yes.
And it can have some other information in the city if anybody ever wanted to replicate it next time. They'd have a starting point at least. Yeah.
I guess the only other column that might be relevant in each case would be which city services there are. Because Snoqualmie, does have both its own police and fire department. Everybody does water, wastewater, stormwater. So the differentiation seems to be the fire department more than anything. Several of them join forces with neighboring communities, or they ride on the county's fire department. Snoqualmie is one of the few that in my group that did have its own fire department. Again, I don't know what that entails for the mayor, probably very little, adding one city service. But again, I thought that might be interesting. It could either go in its own column or it could go in the notes section.
Yeah.
So,
And I was thinking about that too, in relation to the actual jobs they have, right? So just in the one short meeting that we sat in, you know, the complexity of trying to come up with policies that are covered by those services seems to be relatively the same whether you're providing the services or you're not. So if you're talking about enforcement of codes and laws, whether you run the police department yourself from a council perspective or someone else runs it, the policies still apply the same way. But the mayor has a different nuance, because then the police chief would actually report to the mayor. And so that does add an extra complexity there from a oversight perspective. And if there was a scenario where there was any issues that had to be dealt with, you know, disciplinary actions, legal actions, and otherwise, then, you know, that responsibility falls on the mayor. So I don't think it impacts, and this is just, you know, very uneducated conversation right now, but it doesn't seem to impact the council nearly to the extent that it impacts the mayor.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I want us to be clear on, Jennifer, especially if you're leaving mid-January, early January, the data is the data. The data is out there. We can find it. We found a lot of it. I want to be sure that we are all in agreement as to the metrics we're going to use, because that's, to me, is how I envision, if it's a public hearing and someone challenges it, we need to be clear on why we use what metrics. So you're pointing out, for example, I happen to think that the police department, the fire department, the growth of the city budgets that she's managing in this case are all the important metrics. And I think population is somewhat, it's important, but secondary. Now, that's just my opinion, but I think once we agree on what metrics we are going to use, then I think it's very simple.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that I would use in a non-government setting, so I do this all the time in terms of, you know, all of the world actually trying to make salary decisions and you know, build out salary roadmaps, et cetera, is I would use that data to determine percentile. So if I felt like, you know, there were not a lot of special, unique circumstances, I would probably pick the 50th percentile. In other words, I'm going to look at all the data and we're going to try to come in somewhere around the midpoint. But if there were extenuating circumstance, like high growth, high complexity, you know, different nuances of that. For example, I have one manager who, one country manager, let's say of India. I have a country manager of, let's say, the UK, one of Germany, France. I might look at those roles differently based on those complexities, and I might choose the 75th percentile for the person in the UK, and I might choose the 50th percentile for the person in India. So the way I would translate that to this is I would look at the city of Snoqualmie, given these other factors, and if I was looking at the data and saying, okay, we want to be right at the midpoint, that's the 50th percentile, I'd say, no, given these other factors, given the fact that we have our own police department, fire department, and we're high growth, I would say we would look more at the 75th percentile of the data. So in other words, we would expect, you know, a few cities to be higher, but the majority to be lower than where we are. Whereas if we didn't have those complexities, I would target more around the midpoint. So that could be a way, and I'm just, again, that's just philosophical, but that would be typically how I would use that to then determine how to look at the data.
I agree.
If that makes sense, because there's not really like a formula you could create. It's just more of a, you know, here's all the data. here's the highest, here's the lowest, here's the average. Where are we going to be in that spectrum? I think we should be 75th percentile, maybe 80th percentile, given these other factors. And I think that would be relatively easy, at least philosophically, to justify.
Mhm.
I'm good with that. I mean, we can work on that. Deanna?
Yeah, Dina, yes,
Dina, I'm sorry.
it's okay.
I found it interesting in 3 different cases of my 8 that the salary commissions had the support of city staff to go out and dig up data. And then, acting like a commission, the salary commission came together and decided what was important, sort of what we're talking about now. But they didn't dig up all the data. And I just found that sort of interesting, that they were organized in that way, which makes more sense to me, because city to city, I think maybe they're more responsive rather than coming from, you know, some citizen who's sitting on a commission. Maybe wrong about that, but I found it interesting.
Yeah, you know what I found kind of interesting too, as I've called people, Graham, is that nobody's had any problems giving me any data at all.
I know.
I
I was very
you know, I'm just,
surprised, especially
you know,
given the holidays and the snowstorms. I was really surprised.
exactly. And I, you know, I was talking to one person this morning. I'm out in Leavenworth. I took my kids out. I was supposed to be at home today, and we were supposed to be up here yesterday, but they pass got closed, so I had to bring them up today. So you know, I didn't even have my .gov email set up yet, and I just gave them my, you know, my personal email, and she's like, no problem, and just, you know, sent me the RCW of, you know. So I think, you know, there's generally it's public data. So it's very different than my professional life, where I'm always dealing with proprietary, you know, competitive, you know, situations where nobody wants to give you anything. I think all of this data is public. So I think there's not too much of a concern in sharing it in that regard.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was just there seemed to be more support staff than, I don't know, you know, Dina's picking up a lot of this burden, so.
Yeah. I just viewed it as, okay, the city is getting some citizens to do their work for them, and, you know, and that's part of our civic duty, and, you know, here we are.
So let me ask you something about the end product. Can we, at this point, does it make sense to eliminate a few of the municipalities that were on our chart and maybe add some from Dina's spreadsheet here? Because I'm seeing things that look a lot more, at least look on the surface, to be more comparable than what I had in my group. For instance, you know, Black Diamond and Duval are tiny little places. And you know, don't have their own fire department. They just don't seem particularly comparable to me. And
yeah, I think that's true. And that's why I think we eliminated Bellevue. I don't think it would make any sense. But here, as I think about the final product, what I would want to produce back is, here's if we're going to pick, let's say, I don't know, arbitrarily 75th percentile, then in order to do that, you kind of have to show that range. And I agree that there are some cities, Duval would be a good example, where, you know, from a relative standpoint, it should be near the bottom, but from a proximity standpoint, it's important.
mm-hmm.
You know, Duval has had all kinds of growth too, right? So, you know, they've got some of the same issues that Snoqualmie has in terms of their growth of the city, and how they became essentially a bedroom community for Microsoft and all these other tech companies, and, you know, and they've seen a lot of growth as well. So I think when we put it all together, we might find a couple outliers that we remove, but I think it's important that you know, if somebody wants to go question it, you know, they can see. Now, if we put in obvious stuff, you know, that was just clearly we stacked the deck. So it looked like, Snoqualmie was way underpaid. And we didn't show, both high and lows. Then I think I would question it. I'd say, well, you just cherry picked the stuff that made Snoqualmie look the most favorable to give you the biggest increase. But if we show a kind of a section across the board, we can articulate these are ones that are comparable only from a locality perspective, but we don't really think are ones that we should consider comparable. But we can come to that. I think at the end of the day, we could, once we get the final product, we can clean it up and then we can submit the final one. And
Yep.
I think we're on the right track. But if
Can
you want to add any, and I'll do the same thing, I'll go look at it. And if you want to just add some cities, just add them, and then you can just stick Graham or my name next to them, and we'll take it. We'll take on the task of calling them and getting the data.
Yeah, I'm gonna run out of cycles pretty soon. Yeah, I might be retired, but that doesn't mean I'm not busy. And I'm starting to pick up. This is my year end where I'm acting as trustees here and there. So let's just decide what cities we're going to use. I'm not sure why it matters to the city next door if they don't, if they don't have a police department and a fire department. I think we're capable of selecting the list, and let's just get on with that before Jennifer leaves.
That sounds good. Well, I will do this. I know this is a quiet time for me over the next week or two. And so I'm happy, Jennifer, if you see a couple cities you want to add on, just stick my name next to them, and I'll make a couple of phone calls and collect the data. But let's maybe limit it to an additional 5.
Okay, and I can do a couple of calls too. So, because
Okay.
I have finished with my 7, so I'm happy to do a couple more next week. Although I don't know who's going to be in the office next week.
Yeah, a lot of people are new guys. Michael, is there any reason we should deviate from what the last salary commission did, the one that you were on? I mean, you went through all that drill, didn't you? Were you not happy with the cities that you came up with then?
No, it was fine. It was fine. Look, we
Okay.
had a really clear objective last time. But whether we're all overachievers here, which is highly likely, we've already in this meeting had more discussion than we had combined the entire process last time.
Okay. I want to add one other thing and just get your thoughts on it, which I found interesting. In 2 3 of the cities I talked to, the city clerk had mentioned, or what they sent me, the material they sent me, is they had surveyed their council and their mayor, non-city manager form, as to how many hours they spent, the thought being that it became a metric you could look at if there was a challenge in the public hearing. I don't know if that's useful or not. I remember when I was a city council person, I'd spend 35 to 50 hours a month on the duties, of the council. And I'm throwing that out there. I don't know if it's useful one way or another in terms of our council's working for $12.50 an hour. You pick a number. What are your thoughts?
I found that none of mine assigned an FTE value to either council or the mayor, which surprised me. And I would have said right off the bat that 0.25 for Catherine is ridiculous. I'm sure she spends many, many hours at City Hall every month. So I actually think it would be useful to know. I just don't to know what kind of hours we're talking about. But I don't know how successful we would be in getting that.
Well, I think it introduces a variable that we have unlike the rest of the data, where we have definitive data that we can support with public documents. it introduces a variable that we had that is completely, just self-reported, and
Okay.
the thing that I run into, by the way, just, I don't know, maybe it's, maybe it's just my perspective, but when I think about, I don't think the average citizen has any idea that these people make as little money as they do. Like, I mean, the first time I heard it, I was totally shocked. I'm like, what are you talking about? You make $2,500 a month? Are you serious? That's like poverty level. And so, and the city council members make like $14,000 a year.
No, I think it's
So
9,000 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
9,000. I mean, that's
yeah.
half the poverty level, and that's national poverty level. That's not Snoqualmie. If you think about our population in the city of Snoqualmie, and if it were to go to a public hearing, and if it came out that these people make $9,000 a year, I mean, I think the only outpouring would be, well, thank you, because that's ridiculous that you only make $9,000 a year. So I'm not anticipating having to justify, what we pay them. Now, if they all made $90,000 a year or something, we'd probably be having a very different discussion. But none of these people make, enough to remotely support themselves or anybody else.
Right. I think
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I think what anybody who attends city council meetings would react that way. Michael, I'm not sure about the rest of the population. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Because people get funny when it comes to.
They do. I just think that there's so many news stories about what, there's a public news story about the superintendent or the principal of the school that just got a $600,000 settlement by the city of Snoqualmie.
Yeah.
You put that in perspective with city council members making $900 a month or something. I mean, this is just, there are some things that I think people are right, myself included, would look at the government and ask a question of, is that where I want my taxpayer dollars going? But I don't think any of these people they make just absolute peanuts. It seems like they're all doing it almost out of charity.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, there are lots of councils where they don't pay anything. I sat on a council for 6 years in the wealthiest city on the east side and made nothing. So the people that are going to be troublesome, I guess the issue is, do we even want to worry or concern ourselves about that? I tend to be a belt and suspenders kind of guy. And if we get into a public hearing, that's just one more variable that we can use. You're absolutely right, though. It's self-reported. I happen to respond to it because I know how many hours I worked.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to FTE, Jennifer, I'm in agreement with you. What my city said was, they will be paid according to the amount in the ordinance without regard to how many hours they worked. So
correct.
Really the same.
Correct.
They said it's ordinance driven, not FTT driven, was sort of some concept they weren't familiar with for the.
Correct. And look, I do think, Graham, your point about having, if needed, having sort of back of the napkin color commentary of the average city council person puts in X number of hours per month. So if you're really comparing it, they make about what you would make, serving you, a latte at Starbucks, that's a compelling piece of color, but it's not something that I would put in print because we just don't have the data necessarily to support it in a way that, you don't want to, to me, it's too much surface area. So if you start to put something like that in, and then somebody who's troublesome goes down and says, okay, well, I want you to prove to me how many hours they work, now you're down a rabbit hole that's not really relevant in the first place. But it's good colored commentary to be able to have it, if it does come up.
You could probably, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I would say you could probably get where you wanted to be just by noting the number of meetings there are each month and the committee work. I assume that each council member is assigned a certain number of committees. And I think if you just had that as background, you could easily get to the numbers we're talking about without
Correct.
assigning an FTE status. Now, this is for council, not the mayor, obviously, but.
Yeah. And then if I think about the mayor, I think about somebody who theoretically is on call 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for 24 hours a day for, you know, $3,000 a month is just, again, I think we all, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I think she's ridiculously underpaid for that. But let's go look at the data and see what it comes back. But I agree, Graham. I mean, you know, I always, you know, always plan for the best, expect the worst. You know, one of the things that I would recommend that we could do is and I do this all the time, is I put together a holding statement. So it's sort of a paragraph that if there needed to be a press release or something, this is the paragraph that describes what we did and why. And then what's called a rude Q&A. So what are some of the most obnoxious questions people could ask, and how would we answer them? And if we did that ahead of time, that, you know, you're always usually pretty prepared.
Yeah, that's fine. On the mayor's 0.25 FTE equals $3,000 a month. Does anyone know if therefore that equation was 1.0, she then should be paid $12,000 a month or $9,000 a month? I'm just sort of curious as to how that equation worked out and who came up with it. Does anyone know?
Well, I would argue whether that 0.25 was, how long ago that was set up, because you're going to have mayors that don't put as much time in and mayors that put in a lot of time. And so our current mayor, she's at the office virtually every day. And then she has her evening meetings, and then she has her weekend commitments like the tree lighting and all those other community events, right? But I've heard, although I don't have the history, that there was a mayor who hardly ever came into the office. So, I mean, I think part of that is their own personal. And so whether that 0.25 was set up back then as just a, you know, how do we determine a rate kind of thing, you know, and in the future, when there's a new mayor, will they contribute as much time as well, right? So I don't know if you can really use that as a good metric. It's a nice question to ask other cities to see what their mayors are considered, but I think it's going to vary from mayor to mayor how much time they put in.
Well, like I said, the ones I've talked to discarded the concept altogether, which, you know, makes sense to me.
Yeah, me too.
Using it is if we're starting from a baseline. All right, if I know nothing and I parachute in a consulting job and I've got somebody that's paid $3,000 a month and that equals 0.25, then I would conclude that if it was 1.0, it would be $12,000 a month. What I'm trying to do is build up the case that we all understand and agree that she is dramatically underpaid, that she should have been paid more all along because of the 0.25 FTE concept. That's all.
That held it back.
Yeah. So it doesn't look like a horrible growth. If all of a sudden she's at $5,000 or $6,000 a month, then those in the cheap seats in the audience, you know, may have want to dig a little deeper in that. My idea would be, well, she was underpaid to start with because of that concept.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's where we come back to the data with the work that we're doing. And I think the work that we're doing will show that what we come up with is not going to be out of scope or unreasonable across the cities that we looked at and the comparable plans. You know, if we're pushing, and we have to decide this, I guess, if we're going to push for kind of a radical radical shift in pay, then generally speaking, you know, the more we're pushing for, probably the more data we need. But
Right.
if we're going to kind of come in generally where the data says we ought to be, you know, I don't know that we need as much backup. But these are all really good points to consider.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me is Lake Forest Park is almost dead on for us in this sense. And that's one of mine. Lake Forest Park is a strong mayor, and the mayor is paid $36,000 a year, which is what we're paying. And their population is very close to ours, 13,006.
And do
So-
they do have a city administrator though?
No, they're a strong mayor like we are,
So
and they have
they're-
a police department.
Yeah.
So the differentiation would be that we have a city administrator.
No, I'm not concluding. If it's strong mayor, they're either a strong mayor or a manager form. They're a strong mayor form, which is what we are. Now, whether the city clerk is really a city administrator, I don't know. I'm just arguing that that's why we need to agree on what some of these other metrics are. You know,
Yeah.
for example, Snoqualmie is almost completely built out. I think we're approved for 5,500 dwelling units. We're pretty close to that. So whatever growth we're going to go through is going to be in the retail or the new little development cities. That's probably why our development budget is so high, is what I'd mentioned.
Interesting.
That's all I got, folks. You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think it's great discussion, and I think we're making really, really good progress. So good work, everybody. Graham, way out ahead of everybody.
I just
thank you for that.
I had my afternoon blow up that day, and therefore I just started dialing for dollars, as we used to say. In this case, I was dialing for data.
There you go.
Yeah, but like
There
you,
you go.
I was gratified at how open and cordial all the people that I talked to. They were all very, very nice and very, willing to share. Which
Yep.
It was amazing.
it was very satisfying.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, then we have a scheduled meeting on, what's our next meeting?
Is the 4th gonna proceed? Because I had it as tentative.
Yeah, I'm on board for the 4th. Is everybody
Okay.
else?
I'm on board.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got it on my calendar, February 4th, right? What, same time,
Okay.
1:30?
January 4th?
January 4th.
Yes.
Yeah, January 4th, of course.
Okay, and then the next one is not until February 22nd, is that correct?
That I had down as
Yeah.
tentative. Have we decided on that?
Yeah, I think that is there a question of do we want to fit in one next week in between?
Oh, between Christmas and New Year's. I'm okay. Well, certainly.
I mean, it's a question.
Yeah, I can do that. I don't know that we will have, I don't think we will have a lot of new data, only because it'll be hard to source it at this point.
Right.
But we might have a better handle on organizing what we do have.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we could maybe just do a quick check-in, and the reason is normally I wouldn't worry about it, but if we're on a tight time schedule to get something in and kind of have something wrapped up before you go off on vacation, Jennifer, that might help us get there.
Okay. All right.
I can be available if you guys can.
Yeah, I'm widely available. That would be the week of the 26th, right?
Yeah, so what date would you guys like?
Well, shall we
Should
stick
we
with
just-
Wednesday?
Okay,
Same time.
I have a 1 to 2 already. I could do a 2 o'clock.
Wednesday,
works for
the
me.
20. Is that the 28th?
The
What-
28th.
28th.
I'm
Wednesday, the
available on the 28th.
Okay,
So 2 o'clock then.
2 o'clock, the 28th.
okay.
Can we agree that the purpose of this next meeting is to codify what we agree on as to the metrics. I'm just sort of concerned that we've got this whole panorama of data points, metrics out there. Let's decide which 4 or 5 we think are the most important. And I think that will then guide us.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right, so that's the real point of the next meeting to me.
Okay. Good strategy.
Okay,
Okay,
Okay, I'm gonna head
Right,
out
folks.
into this 7-degree weather. And go find my kids.
Lovely.
you-
Very lovely.
are you in Leavenworth now?
Yeah, I'm actually just parked right by downtown. We just got here, and then the kids ran off, and I came back to the car to do this. So
So
I
the
gotta go find
Icicle, make sure the Icicle Brewing Company there, right?
oh, of course,
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
That's a great,
Yeah.
that same young man owns, he and his wife own the hot dog place at the end of the road, the other end of town there. He's really done a nice job. He's a very nice young man. He and his wife.
Yeah, well, my 2 of my kids are 19 and 14, so I probably won't be hitting a lot of breweries. But we may hit the Brat stand down at the end for sure. So
Yeah.
if I don't talk to all of you, have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll catch up next week.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to all, Happy Holidays, whatever you like.
Merry
Yep,
Christmas, everyone.
absolutely.
Be
Goodbye.
safe.
Thanks.
See you
Bye.
next week.
Take care. Bye-bye.